Hello everybody, welcome back to the World AI Only Free-For-All. This is part 11. In the previous episode, a lot has happened and transpired, but before I get into that, check out this glorious Roman mountain range that was constructed with the Roman gods and Greek gods combining. Of course, this is Mount Olympus. We've got the Greek gods, and we are officially safe from outside harm now that our Roman nuclear submarine is safe from the rest of the world. So, in the previous episode, Persia has been on the offensive and the Soviet Union. They have claimed Yerevan, Armenia for themselves, and furthermore, they are outside of the gates of Moscow itself, as they are only a few hundred kilometers away here, south of the capital in Kiev. They've got 3 helicopter gunships outside of Kiev, and they are pillaging the land, bombing Soviet peasants, and really just making a lot of trouble for Stalin here. Of course, Stalin is also still at war with France over here in the west, where they are now mounting an attack on the French city of Lyon. We will see if they are able to capture this city down here. Of course, this will open up a new front for Persia if they are indeed successful in capturing the city, which only has 1 artillery as a defender. Let's go now over to Asia, where in the last episode, Korea has wiped out Japan. Fundamentally, they've taken the last holdout regions of Nagoya and Nara as well. So, with that being said, nothing else has really changed, besides the fact that Persia is mounting an attack and an assault on the Soviet Union. Of course, that has not changed. What did happen previously is that the Persian attack force that was mounting in a naval assault on South America has been pushed back. The Venezuelan people have been able to defend their continent from Persian aggression, which is a good thing for Venezuela. And of course, North America, controlled by the Shoshone, and South America, controlled by the Venezuelans, are now at peace with each other, which is also a very good thing. So, we have a massive amount of English privateers off of the coast of South America. We will see, of course, if this results in any declaration of war. We will see. So, we're going to go now over here to Europe and the Middle East, where we will watch with bated breath to see if Persia is able to strike at Kiev and perhaps take even more Soviet territory. And of course, no atomic bombs have been dropped as of yet. So, we certainly hope that atomic bombs will not be dropped. I'm kind of rooting for the Soviet Union now that France is almost out of the picture. So, I certainly hope that the Soviet Union is able to beat back Persia and take back Armenia. You may think differently. Perhaps you are rooting for the Persians. I know that I'm not. But whether or not of where you stand in this free-for-all, like who you want to win, this should hopefully be a very interesting episode, as the world is still very much in conflict here. The Soviet Union still is leaving its southern city of Kiev relatively undefended here. But on the bright side, the helicopter gunships controlled by Persia have been shot out of the sky by, I believe, a combined force of triplanes, bombers, and bombardments from the city of Kiev itself. Going now here to the west, we have 2 Stalinist Great War infantry units outside of the gates of Lyon. We will see if the gates of Lyon fall. Of course, this is modern-day Venice, or I guess Venice would be over here to the east, but this is also, of course, Italy. So we will see if Italy falls to Stalin. Going now over here to Central Asia. The city of Krasnodar is no longer under threat of Persian annexation. The Soviet Union, in anticipation of this, has moved all of its military units from Siberia into the west, past the Ural Mountains. As you guys can see here, these are the Ural Mountains. This is what separates European Russia from Asian Russia. And all my Russian viewers already know this. But a lot of my American viewers might not know this, so that is why I'm going over it. Of course, Nara still has Japanese units outside of the gates of Nara. Or did I say Nara units? I meant Japanese units outside of the gates of the Korean city of Nara. Of course, America is actually building up quite a defensive force here outside of Philadelphia. Perhaps they will be able to take back some territory, but it's of my personal belief that they have nowhere to expand and thus their likelihood of surviving into the late game will be very unlikely. If I was America, for instance, I would probably set up shop over here in New Zealand, the land of cattle, oil, and uranium. But that would also expose them to being close to Persia, who has hegemony over all of the oceanic region. Going now back over to the active front, we will see in a series of turns, see exactly what happens here. I'm going to end the turn a few different times here, as this seems to be one of the few active fronts going on in this conflict between the Soviet Union and Persia. Of course, the largest conflict that this series has yet to see. Two veritable superpowers at each other's throats here. Of course, one superpower has access to nuclear weapons, which is Persia, a bit asymmetrical, as Russia does not have access to the atomic bomb yet. They do have access to uranium, however, which is good for them, quite historically accurate, as the Russian Federation and the Soviet Union both have massive quantities of uranium in real life. I guess when I'm referring to the Soviet Union, I should use had as opposed to have. Of course, the Soviet Union was disbanded in the very, very tail end of 1991, so they no longer exist. We are still like 24, 25 years onwards from the collapse of the Soviet Union. Perhaps some of my Russian viewers who are watching this were actually born in the Soviet Union. It's a possibility. Very, very interesting time period in Russia, and indeed the world itself. We're going now over here towards Yerevan, which I believe is going to fall into Soviet hands this turn. Like I said in previous episodes, the city is flip-flopping back and forth between Persian and Soviet control. Although now it seems that Persia has struck decisively with cavalry here, and we will see if the Soviets start to send out infantry into retaking Armenia, Chechnya, Dagestan, and Georgia. It's a possibility. Actually, it's more than just a possibility. We have a Iosif Stalin tank outside of the gates of Yerevan itself. The Soviet Union has pulled back from the French city of Lyon. They are either pillaging tiles or sending their men back east. Take a look at this list. This is a good list for literacy, or rather technological innovation in this world, as demographics only shows you who's ahead. This is actually quite interesting. Korea is only one technology, I guess, behind Darius, and Stalin is a full 10 technologies behind Persia. So perhaps Persia will be able to completely eclipse the Soviet Union technology. Of course, once the Soviet Union develops nuclear weapons, they will better be able to defend themselves against the threat of Persia. We're going east now into Asia, where that massive Persian army that was marching through Korean territory is nowhere to be seen. They've either moved onwards or they've moved north or west. It looks like they've actually moved south. They are outside the city of Haiphong, which I believe is either going to be in modern-day Vietnam, Laos, or Cambodia. I'm a bit shaky on this area of Asia. I don't think it's Malaysia, which is like over here. So if anybody lives in this area or knows this area better than me, please correct me in the comments below. Going now, so of course we do have a massive army over here, plus more Persian settlers. Doesn't seem like Persia is ever in want of settlers. However, that being said, I do believe that they've sent most of their military force to the west. This is a very scary thing for the Soviet Union. Look at all of these Persian infantry units, rocket artillery, artillery units, and really just a massive military buildup over here outside the Persian capital of Persepolis. We will see if these units are sent north into Russia. I believe that they probably will be. So let's go now to the outside of South America. Nothing really happening. Of course, the Soviet Union really wants its city over here of Baku to be Eastern Orthodox. Of course, Baku, modern-day Azerbaijan. Going to the north, the Shoshone, nothing really new to report for them. So we're going to go back over here to Europe and Eurasia to see exactly what happens in the next few turns. So like I said earlier, Persia having a massive military, probably going north through Turkmenistan, modern-day Turkmenistan, as seen over here, to the east of the Caspian Sea. and the Aral Sea as well over here, as you guys can see. This sea, though, is nowadays basically dried up. It is quite possibly one of the worst examples of human degradation on the environment that has been seen in modern day history. It's a veritable not economic disaster. Of course, it is an economic disaster for the cities and countries that reside along its coastline. But the Aral Sea it was drained by the Soviet Union back throughout the 70s, 80s, and 90s as an attempt to increase the cotton industry. And Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and Kazakhstan, they made a artificial, I guess you could say, waterway, complete with dams and the like, that drained the sea, the Aral Sea, to supply cotton throughout the Central Asian steppe, as you guys can see over here. But that had the unintended, well, I guess completely intended consequence of drying out the sea. And in fact, if you guys take a look at the pictures of the Aral Sea nowadays, it is completely drained. It's quite sad. You can see the bottom of the Aral Sea. Actually, you can walk across the bottom of the Aral Sea. And the Soviet Union conducted a lot of experimentation on the islands within the Aral Sea. They had some chemical weapons there, some nuclear experimentation and the like out there. So the modern countries of Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, all the countries that border the Aral Sea, they were facing economic hardship as the once thriving industry of catching fish and I guess tourism has all but dwindled in recent years. Seriously, take a look at the Aral Sea. It's really quite sad to see exactly how far the water has receded into the grounds. Enough of that. You guys might think I'm like a bloody hippie in the amount I'm talking about the environment here, but I'm not. I'm just reflecting on one of the worst environmental disasters of the 20th century. So we're going back over here to Persia, where it seems that Persia is starting to send more infantry north through Turkmenistan once again to the east of the Caspian Sea. And if the Soviet Union designed, or rather placed Kiev on this on the border of the Caspian, they would have been able to make a naval force in the Caspian, which would have been quite an advantage for them. It would have been a very good thing for the Soviet Union to have naval units to patrol this territory outside of Yerevan. Of course, they did not. So they are now taking in the consequences of that in action. We do have, of course, the Persian Empire finally attained open borders from France. They are south of Algiers and Marseille, probably working their way up to Ragusa, the Aegean Sea, and the very cusp of the Bosphorus. Of course, the Bosphorus does not exist on this map. I don't know why. It's a bit silly. Of course, you've been following this series. You've been hearing me bitch about that quite a bit. Let's go over here to Central Asia and Siberia, where all Japanese units, with the exception of Johann Brahms, has been annihilated, absolutely decimated. They are all destroyed. No more Japanese military units, no more Japanese settlers. Japan has been wiped out of the game, much like Vietnam, which will probably find work in, Western Europe somewhere. I don't even know. Maybe this Vietnamese worker will get citizenship in England or France or, even Denmark. I couldn't tell you exactly where they're going, but that is beyond the point. Let's take a look at where this settler from Persia is heading. I know that there was a settler, our Persian settler, somewhere around here. Let's take a look. Okay, he's heading to the east, perhaps to settle modern-day Philippines, perhaps modern-day Indonesia as well. Interestingly enough, the Korean turtle ships of the past are still stuck out here outside of these antiquity sites. I don't know why they're still here. I mean, they've been here for, let's see, a few hundred years, a few thousand years, for no apparent reason, as have the Korean turtle ships off of the coast of modern-day Papua New Guinea. Now, of course, Papua New Guinea is a sovereign country north of Australia, which is split between Indonesia in the west and Papua New Guinea over here in the central and east. That actually used to be, at least parts of it used to be, under Dutch and German colonial administration. Of course, Germany had an empire at one point in its history, a very, very small empire. I believe they only had a few different countries, modern-day countries in Africa. I believe Namibia was one of them. German Namibia, I believe, was one of their colonies, and they had a colony in Papua New Guinea as well, in the northeast of Papua New Guinea, if I remember correctly. So, outside of Kiev, there is a full-scale war going on for the battle of the southernmost city of the Soviet Union. Well, of course, discounting Kopang, which is on the Black Sea. If you ask me what is the most surprising thing about this current series, is that nobody has settled Anatolia, and Anatolia is relatively, I mean, it's relatively useful. I mean, you have access to oil and stone and sheep and gold, but nobody as of yet has an actual city in Anatolia. They mainly just have their borders naturally expanding here. So the Soviet Union has expanded into modern-day Istanbul in Turkey and modern-day northern Anatolia up here. So very interesting. We do, of course, have some great generals on both sides of the conflict. We will see if any citadels are erected, perhaps near Kiev, perhaps near Yerevan, Armenia. France and Germany really need to come to peace, though, pretty soon if the Soviet Union is to survive into the late game. Going over here to North America, where really nothing's happening. I mean, if the Shoshone could get a point for having the most amount of workers, they'd probably win. I mean, look at this. They have so many freaking workers everywhere. The food famine is starting to be reversed. Houston, of course, growing. LA is starting to grow as well. San Antonio and Austin, of course, also growing quite exponentially. Both North and South America have rather large military reserves, including Air Force units, which is good. Although it seems like North America has more access to oil, so the Shoshone have a much larger Air Force than South America. Let's go now back over to the border between Persia and the Soviet Union, where, if nothing else, I will just be ending my turn over and over again here, so we can kind of watch the attack on Kiev, the invasion into Kiev, and the defense of the Soviet motherland. We will see if the superior Iosif Stalin tanks are able to defend against the Persian Empire tanks. Of course, Persia has a much larger resource pool in which to draw strategic resources like oil for their tanks. But the Soviet Union is not in any need of oil themselves, as they still have access to oil outside of Leningrad and Kiev over here, and modern day, I believe, Ukraine. Or Russia, I guess, depends on who you ask. That's another controversial political issue that I will not be addressing in this episode. So Russian and Ukrainian viewers, do not worry. I don't pick a side. You know, you guys do what you want to do over there. I'm not qualified in even telling you guys, you know, who's right, who's wrong. That's totally y'all's decision. And figuring out what works best for you. I'm actually not a proponent of NATO expansion into Ukraine. I know that this would be a provocation towards Russia, and you know, the West doesn't really need to provoke Putin. Looks like Stalin has completed the Manhattan Project, so Stalin can now build nuclear weapons, which is a bit historical, as in real life, the Soviet Union developed nuclear bombs, I believe, in the 1950s, so they're only about 60 years late in this time period. So we're going to keep ending the turn here. As I said, the only notable wars that are happening concurrently are the invasion of the Soviet Union on the part of Persia and the defense of the motherland on the part of Russia. So we will see if Kiev holds. I believe that the only thing that will allow Persia a decisive strike into Soviet territory would be actually to be dropping nuclear bombs. But thus far, no nuclear bombs have been dropped into Russia. We do, of course, have a large amount of land that is smoldering outside of Kiev and Armenia. So we're going to end our turn once again. I know that you guys are probably thinking, like, well, why is he only looking at this front of war? Well, this is the only front of war, like I said earlier, that is notable. After this turn, I will kind of go around the world just checking to see if I'm not missing out on anything else. Of course, Persia sending in all of their units into Kiev. Kiev dropping in health rapidly here. If the Soviet Union is not able to push back the invading force of the Persian mechanized infantry and helicopter gunships, they will more than likely lose Kiev as a city here in southern Soviet Union. Very unfortunate for Russia, as the technologically superior Persian forces have access to mechanized infantry, which is very startling for a few different reasons. So before I go to next turn, we're going to take a look at Western Europe, where indecisively we still have Soviet troops in France for no really apparent reason. They really need to go to peace if Stalin is to defend itself against Persia. Of course, if they were to take the city of Lyon, they would be destroyed by the Persian naval forces here in the Mediterranean. We go now to Africa, where we have a military buildup on the part of Kilwa, although Kilwa is, of course, no match technologically to Persia itself. But we're starting to see machine guns, mobile SAMs, and a more modernized, well, not really, I was going to say naval fleet, but they still have privateers, although they do have aircraft carriers as well, although nowhere near the number that Persia has. Of course, Persia has a massive naval force outside over here in South Asia, outside of India and Burma, or Myanmar, sorry if I'm going to be politically correct with you guys. Of course, Myanmar is the name of the military dictatorship that has installed itself illegally, and in Burma, I'm going to drop all pretenses of political correctness there. I mean, I don't think any of my viewers are going to support Myanmar here, so that is one of the less controversial issues that I hold strong convictions for. Going here into Asia, where Korea, once again, very strongly propping themselves up here in eastern Siberia. Johann Brahms is still working his way west, probably in the Soviet Union, to bring some music to Soviet ears. Perhaps Stalin is still listening to Trololo. I'm not really quite sure. Maybe the censorship of lyrics in the Soviet Union in this particular universe is less stringent than the large-scale censorship that was in place in the actual Soviet Union in real life. Of course, anything that did not really abide by the Communist Party lines was censored underneath I believe it was like a propaganda bureau of the Soviet Union, of the USSR. For any Russian viewers or anybody who's in the know, you can let me know. But I believe that every single song, book, and piece of artwork was, scanned and checked over for any type of ideological irregularities that were not in line with the Communist Party. Let's go now over here to Kiev, where it seems to me that the Soviet Union is about to lose one of its key cities, one of its most advanced, and I believe it's the second city, one of its highest population cities, and it'll be a tragedy if the Soviet Union loses Kiev. But I think we have to prepare for this eventuality. Of course, Kiev, down to the very last of its health, being brutalized by the invading communist invaders of Persia. We will see, of course, if the Soviet Union is able to throw back these Mila units. They were not, which means that next turn, I do believe that the Persian helicopter gunship and mechanized infantry will be able to take Kiev for themselves. Let's go now over to Eastern Soviet Union, where no fighting has really broke out with Persia so far. Siberia is safe for the time being. Well, safe anyways from military units, not safe for musicians and archaeologists, which are going all over the Siberian countryside here. Of course, Korea is also quite technologically advanced. We are seeing nuclear submarines, rocket artillery, helicopter gunships. Korea, if they were to declare war on, let's say, Russia, they are definitely a wild card. They have atomic bombs as well. They were the second civilization, for those of you who are just tuning in, to actually receive atomic bombs. Let's take a look at Soviet air power here. They've modernized their Great War bombers into actual bombers, and their biplanes into fighters, although we do not see any atomic bombs yet on the part of the Soviet Air Force. We will see, of course, if this situation changes. So, looking now over here to Kiev, it is of my personal opinion, or rather prediction, that Kiev will fall to Persia this particular turn. Of course, Persia has just completed the CN Tower. Very, very scary. Kiev has been captured by the Persian forces. Very, very bad news for Stalin. This is really, really bad news for him. We will see, of course, if he is able to take back Kiev from the Persian invaders. We will see this turn if he is able to do so. Of course, he does have some IS-2 Iosif Stalin tanks outside of the gates of Kiev. He might be able to recapture the city next turn. We're going to find out. And I'm actually going through more turns than I normally do in most of my World AI Battle series. If Persia is not able to eradicate the tanks outside of the gates of Kiev, the Soviet Union might very well be able to recapture their city. People are starting to denounce Persia, and by people I mean England, who have so far been a very peaceful, neutral third party in this game. Will the Soviet Union be able to recapture Kiev? They did, but very much not in the clear. I mean, they still have quite a bit of Persian units outside the gates of Kiev, and Kiev has been reduced from a 19 population city to a 4 population city, very much depopulated, unfortunately, for Stalin and the Russian people. Now, however, it seems that Kiev is in a much more secure position, as Persia only has rocket artillery, which cannot themselves capture any territory. Soviet Union sending a lot more tanks and infantry down on its southern borders with Persia here, over here in the stronghold of Yerevan, the capital of Persian Armenia. We have a massive militarization of the Caribbean. Did I just say Caribbean? Sorry, I had a brain fart. I meant the Mediterranean. The Caribbean, of course, is over here, and firmly in the hands of, well, not firmly, I guess. The only part of the Caribbean that's firmly in anybody's hands is Cuba and Jamaica, who are both in the hands of the Shoshone. Right, so let's go over here to northwest North America, where America, United States, that is, Washington, has been able to surprisingly to support such a large army with just one city. That's surprising to me, considering that civilization has a hard cap on military units, depending, of course, on your economy, I believe your technological advancement, and a few other factors which I am not so in the know about. Of course, Essen over here, firmly in German control. Bismarck has been able to defend themselves against Persia, who has themselves been very nonchalant in their war with Germany. Germany very much, for all intents and purposes, in peace. However, that being said, don't let Persia fool you. They are still sending settlers everywhere across the world. They have just settled a new city on the north of Australia, the city of Ray. Pretty soon, I think they have so many settlers that they'll run out of names for their cities. That'll be a bit interesting. Perhaps we'll get Persepolis 2 in the future. But now that that's taken care of, we will go back over here to the European theater, where France, actually, is developing more and more of a military to beat back the fascist Soviet invaders. Very, very interesting development on the part of France. I don't believe they even have a ideology yet. We will check at the end of this episode. Or maybe it's England that doesn't have an ideology. Let me take a sip of water here. Talking nonstop for 30 minutes definitely takes its toll on your throat, so I need to quench my throat here so that I can actually continue commentating. Right, so Kiev in the hands of the Soviet Union. We will see if the Persians will mount yet another offensive on the southern Soviet city, although for now it seems that Kiev is in the clear. Of course, a massive rebuilding and restructuring program will have to be placed around the city of Kiev to rebuild. It was just bombarded down to 0 health once again, but as I've reiterated in the past, and as all seasoned Civilization players will know, any ranged units like artillery or aircraft cannot capture cities. It is just infantry, tanks, and melee units that can. We have a renewed Soviet offensive on Yerevan. Perhaps the Soviet Union is trying to re-exert its control over Armenia. And they might be in a position to do so, actually, as the main battle force of Persia has been wiped out by the Soviet Union, by the Iron Curtain, and by a combined force of aircraft and inspired Soviet defenders. Of course, defending your own territory is always a much more just cause than invading a foreign sovereign nation. We see this in most civil conflicts or most military conflicts in history. Excuse me. So the Great Patriotic War is still going quite well for Persia and Russia. Sorry, I meant to say Russia, not Persia. Russia to this point has only lost one city effectively, as they've been able to retake Kiev, and they've gained 2 cities on the Western Front. We will see if they will be able to hold on to these cities. Major news: Africa is now in possession of atomic bombs. Let me just double check here when I zoom in here to make sure there's no fallout anywhere. I don't believe any nuclear weapons have fallen as of yet. But take a look at the massive military buildup outside of excuse me, Soviet Armenia. We have multiple Stalin tanks, some battleships supporting bombardments, and we do have some Stalinist infantry units. We will see, of course, how effective these units are in taking back some territory. We do have a Persian settler over here going northeast into, I believe this is Mongolia, kind of getting close to that border of Mongolia and the Soviet Union. Around here would be the modern-day city of Irkutsk. Like I said, I have a Russian friend who is from Irkutsk, so Irkutsk is pretty cool. Of course, that's nestled between the border of Mongolia and the Russian Federation in the modern-day, I guess, geopolitical landscape. Let's go over here once again, to the battle between Persia and the Soviet Union. Of course, if there is any other war going on between any other foreign countries, we will be going over them as well. But thus far, the Soviet Union is at war with Persia and France, and those are the only conflicts that are notable. As I believe Korea is still at war with Japan, but Japan has been reduced to 0 cities and 1 great person. Coincidentally, that Vietnamese worker that has been working his way to the west is outside the city-state of Ragusa, which makes me think that he wants citizenship in the French Republic, or perhaps even to the west in Europe. Of course, Europe nowadays is facing massive immigration from Africa and Asia, as citizens from all sorts of war-torn countries are seeking refuge in, I guess, the sanctuary of Europe. There are a lot of movements against this particular demographic development in Europe. A lot of Eurosceptics that want out of the European Union. I guess it's a bit different, but a lot of right-wing groups in Europe are trying to cut down on immigration. Of course, the example I gave in the previous episode was France with the Front National. I believe there's movements in Sweden, Denmark, Norway, and pretty much every European country to cut back on immigration. Of course, in England, for those of you who are English, there is the English Defensive League. A lot of these movements are very, very